What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel. If you guys are new, welcome. Today we are covering a topic that I don't see talked about too much lately, but I definitely have a lot of questions about it in videos and just when I play with some people inside of Destiny. And that is talking about our mods that we throw on our weapons to do more damage in different situations. Our boss spec, our minor spec, and our major spec. Now all three of these, when you throw them on a weapon, they tie to a different type of enemy within Destiny 2 that will be taking more damage when you have that mod on your weapon. So to go over what each of these mods do and the enemies that are actually affected by each. So to start out, we are going to be going over our minor spec just because it is a pretty easy one. It is for a rank and file enemies within Destiny 2. Now these rank and file enemies, you're getting about 7 to 8%, which is across the board between these minor, major, and boss specs. That's the extra damage increase that you will get against the enemy that the mod affects. So for these minor spec, that rank and file enemy is any enemy that is a red bar enemy within Destiny. Now this even means the knights that have red bars, those still count as rank and file, and they are just basically your typical ad clear. So if you're looking for ad clear or that's your job in a certain mission, so throw on that minor spec for your auto rifles, SMGs, pulse rifles, hand cannons, sidearms, scout rifles, stuff like that for your little bit of ad clear. Throw on that minor spec to get that extra little bit of damage and wipe out those enemies faster. Red bars only for minor spec. Easiest one, simplest one to go over. Next, we are going over our major spec. Now this one has a little controversy with boss spec dealing with our majors, which we will go over right here. So major spec is more damage against powerful enemies. Once again, 7 to 8% damage increase against majors and elites. So these are usually your orange bar enemies like your resilient shanks, captains, and vandals. Anytime you see an orange bar enemy, this counts as one of those majors and elites. So in the gameplay, you can see me doing Wrathborn hunts. Those knights that are orange bars that I'm shooting with my bow, they are taking more damage when I have major spec equipped on the bow instead of boss spec because they are those orange bar enemies. Now, actually, champions do fall within the major spec category. They count as majors and elites. So as you can see in the gameplay behind me, I went into the Lost Sector K1 communication and I was doing damage on the first overload captain within the Lost Sector. So with boss spec on my linear fusion rifle, I was doing just over 37,000 damage in the head on the overload champion once he was stunned. Now when we switched to major spec on our linear fusion rifle, we were doing just over 40,000 damage on the enemies. So an extra 3,000 damage total on this weapon when you switched between boss spec and major spec for champions. Definitely if you are looking to clear champions, throw on major spec. This usually goes on your shotguns, fusion rifles right now with champions, snipers, grenade launchers, bows, LMGs, stuff like that you can use at range and against a varying amount of enemies, since orange bars are tougher than our rank and file enemies. Last but not least, we have our boss spec. Now this one is the DPS king that you want to throw on your weapons. This raises damage against bosses and vehicles. Once again, it's about a 7 to 8% damage increase when you have this mod on against those bosses and vehicles. Now, bosses in the game of Destiny usually are your yellow bar enemies. Now, you can see these at the end of strikes, at the end of story missions, in the raids, in the dungeons, anything like that. They usually have a name tied to them like Brakazan, Atheon, Templar, anything like that that has actual name tied to the enemy along with that yellow bar counts as a boss / mini boss. So this is what you're going to be wanting to use a boss spec on, especially if you're going in and trying to do high DPS on a boss. At the end of a raid like Atheon, throw boss spec on your weapons and really let it crank. Now some of the weapons that you usually throw these on, once again we got our rockets, grenade launchers, sword, linear fusion rifles, LMGs, anything that cranks out some high DPS in itself. add that boss spec on, get your 7 to 8% increased damage, and absolutely one phase bosses within the game. So that's it for what enemies are affected by each of these mods. Like I state again, champions, biggest part, they fall within our major spec category, so throw on your major spec when you are dealing with champions, not boss spec. Biggest point of this entire video for sure. So hopefully this helped you guys out with figuring out which mods to throw on your weapons when you're running through some of that end game content. Just going for ad clear, throw on your minor spec, dealing with those red bar enemies. If you're going for a little bit more damage mixed with ad clear, throw on your major spec so you can deal with your champions and your orange bar enemies that are a little tougher to kill. And finally, if you're going for straight DPS and just boss damage, throw on that boss spec to deal with those yellow bar enemies, anybody that has an actual name as an enemy within the game, like Atheon, something like that. So thank you guys again so much for watching. Hopefully this helps you guys out with this little controversial topic, little different topic. So I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.